Imagine waking up to a headline that says, "The US has just bought Greenland." Sounds crazy. Well, Washington has tried it before and might try again. But here's the real story. While the US debates, China is already making its move. They call themselves a near-Arctic state, even though they are miles away. They're building icebreakers, investing billions in Arctic infrastructure, and partnering with Russia to dominate the region. Meanwhile, America is playing catch-up in a game it might already be losing. The Arctic is melting, literally and politically. Beneath the ice, a goldmine of oil, gas, and rare minerals. And as new trade routes open, the fight for Arctic is turning into the next greater power struggle. So is the US about to lose control on one of the most valuable regions on Earth? Or is there still time to turn the tide? My name is Shyam, and let's unravel this thread. The Arctic might look like an endless frozen wasteland, but beneath all that ice is a jackpot of resources, game-changing trade routes, and serious military power. Let's start with what's underground. The Arctic is believed to hold 13% of world's undiscovered oil and a massive 30% of its untapped natural gas. That's billions of barrels of oil and trillions of cubic feet of gas just sitting there, waiting to be pulled out. And it doesn't stop there. The Arctic is also packed with rare earth minerals, the stuff that powers everything from smartphones to electric car batteries to military tech. In a world running on energy and high-tech gadgets, this place is basically a gold mine. But it's not just about what's under the ice, it's also about what's on top. As the planet heats up, the Arctic ice is melting, opening up new shipping routes. Right now, most goods traveling between Europe and Asia have to take long, expensive detours through places like the Suez Canal. But if ships could cut through Arctic, travel distances could drop by up to 40%, slashing costs and speeding up global trade. Some experts are even calling it the Panama Canal of the North. Then there's the military angle. Controlling the Arctic means controlling these valuable resources and trade routes, and the major powers know it. Russia already dominates the region with the largest Arctic military presence, boasting over 50 icebreakers and military bases scattered across the area. China, despite being 900 miles away, calls itself a near-Arctic state, which is a stretch to say the least. But they are throwing billions into Arctic projects. Meanwhile, the US is starting to realize it's falling behind and needs to step up before it's too late. So if Arctic is this valuable, who's making the first big move? Well, the game is already in motion and the competition is heating up fast. Let's talk about China's Arctic strategy, often called the silent takeover. It's kind of wild how a country 900 miles away from the Arctic just decided to label itself near-Arctic state. But this isn't just a fancy title, it's a calculated move to justify its growing presence in the region. And this isn't the first time China has played this game. It's using the same strategy it used in Africa and South China Sea, buying influence, securing key resources, and slowly changing the rules in its favor. In Africa, China poured billions into infrastructure projects, locking governments into economic dependence. In South China Sea, it built artificial islands and then claimed them as sovereign territory. Now, it's making moves in the Arctic, investing in Greenland's rare earth mining sector, gaining a foothold in Arctic trade routes, and partnering with Russia to control the Northern Sea route. Its biggest move? The Arctic Silk Road, a shipping shortcut between Asia and Europe that could cut transit times and reduce dependence on US-controlled trade routes. And to make it all happen, a growing fleet of icebreakers, giving China the physical access it needs to the frozen north. And then there's Russia. If you want to play the Arctic game, teaming up with Russia, the country with the largest Arctic territory and the biggest icebreaker fleet, is a smart move. China and Russia are working together to develop Northern Sea Route, which runs through the Russian waters. This partnership isn't just about trade or resources, it's a geopolitical power play against the West. So how is US responding? It's finally waking up to Arctic's importance. There are plans to expand the icebreaker fleet and increase military operations in the region. But there is a catch. The US is dealing with budget constraints and struggling shipbuilding industry. While it tries to catch up, Russia and China are already miles ahead. At this point, it's clear China isn't just playing in the Arctic, it's rewriting the rulebook. But what do you think? Is China's slow and steady takeover unstoppable? Or can the US still turn the tide? Let me know your thoughts in the comments before we dive into America's next move. Let's talk about the US and Greenland, a story that started as a meme but is actually a serious geopolitical play. Remember when Trump said he wanted to buy Greenland in 2019? The internet had a blast and Denmark's prime minister called it absurd. But here's the thing, it wasn't actually a crazy idea. In fact, the US has had its eye on Greenland for decades. Back in 1946, President Harry Truman actually offered Denmark $100 million in gold to buy Greenland. Why? Because even then, the US saw it as a critical military asset. Greenland sits right between North America, Europe, and the Arctic, making it an ideal strategic location. At that time, the Cold War was heating up, and controlling Greenland meant securing an early warning system against Soviet attacks. Denmark refused the offer, but the US still managed to establish Thule Air Base, one of the most important military installations in the Arctic. Fast forward to 2019, and Trump made headlines for wanting to buy Greenland. People laughed, but reasoning was the same. Greenland is a military and economic gold mine. But there's more. Greenland is rich in natural resources. It's loaded with rare earth minerals like neodymium and dysprosium, the stuff used in smartphones, electric vehicles, and even fighter jets. Right now, China controls over 60% of global's rare earth supply. If the US had direct access to Greenland's resources, it could cut down its reliance on China. That's a big deal. Of course, Denmark owns Greenland, and they weren't exactly excited about selling it. When Trump's offer got shut down, he even cancelled a trip to Denmark out of frustration. The Danish Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, made it clear Greenland is not for sale. End of story, right? Not quite. Denmark might not want to sell Greenland, but they also don't want China moving in. And that's why the US has a plan B. Instead of buying Greenland outright, it's securing influence through military bases, economic deals, and diplomatic pressure. China has been trying to invest in Greenland's mining projects, but the US and Denmark have pushed back hard. The US even sent Greenland $12 million in aid, basically a way of saying, stick with us, not them. And now that Trump is back in the White House, Greenland is back on Washington's radar. This time, the strategy might be different. Instead of trying to buy Greenland outright, the US could push for stronger economic and military ties, securing its influence while keeping China and Russia out. Some reports even suggest that Trump's team is already exploring new ways to expand US's presence on the island. With the Arctic competition heating up fast, the real question is, how far will the US go to lock down its position? Russia isn't just interested in Arctic, it basically owns it. More than half of Arctic coastline belongs to Russia, and they have built more military bases than anyone else. While the US and China are busy debating strategy, Russia has been silently expanding its grip for years. And when it comes to icebreakers, Russia has over 50, the biggest fleet in the world. The US, just 2. That's like showing up to a Formula 1 race on a bicycle. Since the war in Ukraine, Russia has doubled down on its Arctic ambitions. With Western sanctions cutting it off, Moscow has gotten even cozier with China, teaming up on energy projects, infrastructure, and shipping routes. So now you've got Russia with its military muscle and China with its deep pockets slowly taking over the region. Not exactly the outcome West was hoping for. Meanwhile, NATO is stepping up. With Finland and Sweden joining the alliance, the Arctic just got a whole lot more crowded. Finland, which shares an 830-mile border with Russia, brings NATO right up to Russia's doorstep. More Western forces, more surveillance, more pressure on Russia's Arctic control. So, does this mean we are heading towards a full-blown Arctic conflict? Not necessarily, but the tension is real. Russia sees the Arctic as its backyard, and it isn't about to give up its advantage. The West is trying to catch up, but it's years behind. And China? It's sitting back, letting Russia do the heavy lifting while it quietly builds its influence. The Arctic might still be frozen, but geopolitically, it's heating up fast. First, the US might finally get serious. So far, Washington has been slow to act, but with China and Russia making big moves, the US could decide it's time to step up. More military bases, stronger partnerships with Greenland, and maybe even an actual Arctic strategy, one that isn't just reacting to whatever the other guys do. The Pentagon has already signaled interest, and with new trade routes opening up, this could be America's chance to secure its place at the table. Meanwhile, China isn't slowing down. It's playing the long game, investing in Greenland, expanding its icebreaker fleet, and strengthening its ties with Russia. If China locks down a strong foothold in the Arctic, it could control future global shipping routes and rare mineral access. That's a serious power move. Then there's Russia. Right now, it's the dominant Arctic player, but sanctions and economic struggles could weaken its grip. And guess who's ready to step in? China. And if Russia's economy takes a hit, China could start taking over key Arctic projects, shifting power even further east. And the worst case scenario? Actual conflict. So far, the Arctic has been more about strategic maneuvering than direct confrontation. But as tensions rise, that could change. A military buildup, a territorial dispute, or even just a bad miscalculation could turn the Arctic from a cold frontier into a global flashpoint. One thing's for sure, the Arctic won't stay quiet for long. So where does that leave us? The Arctic, once a frozen afterthought, is now the stage for a high-stakes geopolitical showdown. The US is scrambling to catch up, China is playing the long game, and Russia, despite its economic struggles, is still holding its ground as the dominant Arctic power. It's a region packed with opportunity, rising tensions, and ice that's melting way faster than anyone is ready for. At its core, this isn't just about resources or trade routes, it's about power. Who gets to shape the future of global shipping? who controls the rare minerals that fuel our technology. And in a world already split by economic and military rivalries, will Arctic become a rare zone of cooperation or just another battlefield for influence? Right now, the future is uncertain. The US could step up its Arctic game. China could quietly keep expanding its reach, and Russia's role could shift depending on its internal struggles. But one thing is clear: the Arctic won't stay on sidelines much longer. So what do you think? Is the US too late to the Arctic battle? Or is there still time to push back against China and Russia? Drop your take in the comments. And if you found this breakdown insightful, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next video. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.